You destroyed it. The relationship that finally looked like the one you'd always wanted. The career that made your mother stop asking questions. The version of yourself that fit, that worked, that people recognized. You burned it down, not carelessly, not by accident. Something in you knew, before you had words for it, that this structure could not hold what you were becoming. And in the space where it used to stand, you felt two things at once: the terror of nothing and the unmistakable relief of being free. The problem is not that you did it once. The problem is that you've done it 9 times, and the 10th is beginning to look familiar. We live inside a culture that has turned this pattern into a brand. Reinvent yourself, close that chapter, new year, new me. There are entire industries built on the assumption that the highest form of courage is walking away and starting fresh. Your social media feed is a graveyard of chapter-closed captions, each one collecting hearts from people who mistake motion for progress. You leave a job, and they call it growth. You leave a relationship, and they call it boundaries. You leave a city, a friend group, an entire identity, and they call it brave. And it feels brave the first time. The second time, even the third time, still carries that electric charge of possibility, the dizzying lightness of having nothing to lose. But by the 7th time, something has shifted. The lightness is gone. What remains is a kind of compulsion dressed up as freedom. You are not choosing to leave, you are unable to stay. And the culture that celebrates your departures has no language for this distinction, because the culture profits from your restlessness. It sells you the next apartment, the next city, the next course, the next self, and never once asks you why the last 10 weren't enough. No one around you sees the pattern. They see someone bold, someone who refuses to settle. What they don't see is that every structure you build has a timer on it, and the timer is always set to about 3 years. And no one, not the culture, not your friends, not even you, has stopped to ask the only question that matters. Why does every version of your life have an expiration date? What you are living is not a personality flaw. It is an archetype. Carl Jung observed that the human psyche moves through distinct phases on its way to wholeness, and each phase is governed by an archetypal energy, a pattern so deep it has been encoded in myths, fairy tales, and sacred texts for millennia. The phase you are living is called the Destroyer, and it is one of the most misunderstood forces in the entire journey of becoming who you are. The Destroyer sits at a critical threshold. It arrives after you've spent years building your identity, your competence, your place in the world. You've been the innocent, the orphan, the warrior, the caregiver. You've assembled a life. And now some part of you, a part that operates below the reach of your conscious mind, knows that the assembly is complete, and that completion is not the same as wholeness. So it initiates a demolition. This is not pathology. In the medieval language of alchemy, this phase was called the nigredo, the blackening, the first and most terrifying stage of transformation, where everything solid must dissolve before gold can emerge. But here is what no one tells you. There are 2 versions of this demolition. One transforms, the other just repeats. And 5,000 years ago, one of the oldest myths ever recorded mapped the exact difference between them. The shadow version of the Destroyer does something very specific that feels, from the inside, like transformation, but is actually its opposite. She tears something down, a relationship, a career, an entire life she assembled with great effort. And in the rubble, she feels a brief, blinding clarity, the intoxicating sense that now, finally, she is free to become who she really is. So she begins to build again, quickly, almost immediately, because the empty space where the old life used to stand is unbearable. It is a void, And the void has a quality that most people will do almost anything to avoid. It asks you to exist without a story about yourself. So she builds a new city, a new relationship, a new career, a new version of herself. And it works for a while. The new structure holds. People around her are impressed by her courage, her adaptability, her refusal to be trapped. But somewhere around year 2, the familiar pressure returns. A tightness, a restlessness, a creeping sense that this too is a costume she put on too quickly. And by year 3, the demolition begins again. This is not transformation. This is rotation. She is turning on an axis, not moving along a path. The structures change. Different apartment, different partner, different job title. But the foundation underneath never does, because she never stayed in the empty space long enough to discover what that foundation actually is. The question she has never asked, the question the void would have given her had she stayed, is this: what if the thing that needs to be destroyed is not the life you built, but the way you build? 5,500 years ago, in ancient Sumer, someone carved this exact pattern into a clay tablet, not as advice, as a myth, which means they understood it not as a problem to be solved, but as a journey to be endured. The myth is called the Descent of Inanna, and it is the oldest recorded story of a woman walking willingly into her own destruction. Inanna was the queen of heaven and earth. She had everything the ancient world could offer a goddess: power, beauty, authority, the worship of nations. By every measure, she had arrived. She was the perfected product of the building phase. And yet something called to her from below, a whisper from the Underworld, the realm of the dead, ruled by her sister, Ereshkigal, a figure she had never visited, never acknowledged, never faced. Inanna could not explain why she needed to go. She only knew that the call had become impossible to ignore. She descended, and at the entrance to the Underworld she encountered not one gate but 7. At each gate, the guardians demanded she remove one piece of her royal identity. At the first gate, her crown. At the second, her necklace of lapis lazuli. At the third, the double strand of beads from her breast. Then her breastplate, her gold bracelet, her lapis measuring rod, and finally, her royal robe. Each object was not merely decorative. Each was a symbol of who she was, her authority, her beauty, her status, her power. And at each gate, she asked the same question, why, and received the same answer. These are the ways of the Underworld. Do not question them. This is what the Destroyer phase actually requires, and what the Shadow Destroyer skips entirely. It is not the destruction of your circumstances, it is the destruction of your identity, layer by layer, story by story, until you stand naked before the thing you have been avoiding. Not your failed relationship, not your wrong career, the thing underneath all of them. Inanna passed through all 7 gates, stripped of everything. And when she finally stood before Ereshkigal, her dark twin, the sister who held everything Inanna had refused to look at, the judges of the Underworld turned their gaze on her, and their gaze killed her. Not metaphorically. The myth says she died, and her corpse was hung on a hook in the wall of the Underworld. She hung there for 3 days. This is the moment the Shadow Destroyer cannot tolerate, the void. The absolute zero between who you were and who you will become. The space where there is no identity to wear, no story to tell, no structure to hide inside. The Shadow Destroyer, the moment she feels this emptiness, grabs the nearest material and starts building again. Anything, any structure, any story, just to fill the silence. Inanna did not build. Inanna hung on a hook, dead, for 3 days. And it was precisely this, the willingness to remain in the nothing, that made her resurrection possible. The myth tells us that Enki, the god of wisdom, created 2 small beings, genderless, insignificant, so tiny they could slip through the cracks of the Underworld unnoticed. He sent them to Ereshkigal,
not to fight her, not to reason with her, not to rescue Inanna by force. He sent them to do one thing only, to witness Ereshkigal's suffering. When Ereshkigal moaned, they moaned with her. When she cried out in pain, they echoed her pain. They offered her nothing but the experience of being seen. This is the mechanism of transformation the myth encodes. The shadow is not defeated, it is not conquered, it is not fixed or healed or transcended. It is witnessed, acknowledged, met with something that looks, in its simplest form, like compassion. And in the moment Ereshkigal felt seen, she released Inanna's body. The water of life was poured. Inanna rose. But she did not rise the same. She rose carrying something she did not have before, a knowledge of her own darkness, an awareness that the Queen of Heaven and the Queen of the Underworld are two halves of the same woman, that you cannot be whole in the light if you have never stood in the dark. And there was a price. The Underworld demanded a substitute. Someone had to take Inanna's place. She could not simply return to her old life and pretend the descent had not happened. Transformation costs something. It always does. Inanna chose her husband, Dumuzi, the one figure in her life who had not mourned her absence, who had sat on her throne and carried on as if she had never existed, the part of her life that did not register her death. This is the price the integrated destroyer pays consciously, and the shadow destroyer pays unconsciously over and over. Something in your life must be sacrificed. Not everything, not your entire existence, but the specific thing that did not grieve your absence. The relationship that wouldn't have noticed if you disappeared. The career that needed your labor but not your soul. The identity that fits so well no one, including you, ever questioned whether it was true.
You know the difference between these two kinds of destruction in your body. The shadow cycle ends with exhaustion, the bone-deep fatigue of having rebuilt your life yet again, knowing somewhere behind your sternum that you will be here again in 3 years. The integrated passage ends differently. It ends with a grief that has a bottom, a sorrow that, when you stop running from it, turns out to be finite. And on the other side of that finite grief, something emerges that is not built by panic, but grown by patience. There's a woman who did this in public, and the culture watched without fully understanding what it was seeing. Elizabeth Gilbert dismantled her life, a marriage, a career trajectory, a house, an identity that by every external measure was working. She did what the destroyer does. She tore the whole thing down to its foundation. And then she did the thing the shadow destroyer cannot do. She did not immediately rebuild. She went to Italy and ate. She went to India and sat in silence. She went to Bali and waited. This is not a story about finding yourself in beautiful locations. This is a story about a woman who tolerated the void long enough for something real to emerge from it. The culture reduced this to a travel memoir, a self-help narrative, an aspirational lifestyle. What it actually was, if you read it through the lens of the myth, was a voluntary descent. A woman stripping herself of her 7 gates worth of identity and hanging in the emptiness until something new grew, not from her will, but from her willingness to remain in the dark. The difference between Gilbert and the woman who moves to a new city every 3 years is not courage. They both have courage. The difference is that Gilbert stayed in the nothing. She did not fill the void with the next relationship, the next project, the next version of herself. She let the void be empty, and the void eventually answered. The destroyer is the most frightening archetype in the entire journey of individuation, because it asks you to do the one thing your entire nervous system is designed to resist: let go without knowing what comes next. Every cell in your body is built for survival, and survival means holding on to identity, to structure, to the story you tell yourself about who you are. The destroyer says that story has become your prison, and the only key is the willingness to stand in the space where no story exists and trust that you are still here without one. You know the pattern. You've always known it. What you haven't known until now is that the demolition was never the problem. The problem was the speed of the rebuild, the urgency with which you filled the silence, the terror of being no one for long enough to discover who you actually are. 5,000 years ago, a goddess hung on a hook in the dark for 3 days and rose with the knowledge of her own wholeness. The myth is still here because the pattern is still here. The only question it leaves you with is the one it has always asked. Can you stay in the empty space long enough to let it change you?